Hey, good evening, Flip. We want to sing a couple songs together before we hear from Pastor Brady. So I encourage you to sing with us right where you are. I searched the world. God, we pray and believe that, and we sing full of faith this evening. But there is indeed nothing that is better than you, because you are good.
Hey, what's going on, Flip students? Pastor Braden here again, and we are in week 3 of our series in the book of Ruth. So you can go ahead and flip to chapter 3 of the book of Ruth. That's in the Old Testament right after Judges. And so go and flip there. And I want to start by just kind of recapping where we've been. If you've not been with us or you've missed the last couple of weeks, I want to recap where we've been. So week 1, we talk about this Moabite Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi. Naomi is married, has 2 kids. Their kids get married, and Ruth is her daughter-in-law, and all of her family essentially dies. Ruth and her are left, and they went through some hard times, and they stuck with one another, and they were transformed by God. Ruth, we see she starts using the proper name of the Lord and all these things, though she was a Moabite and was formerly not capital Lord God, Lord worshiper. So we see that, and then we get to chapter 2, and we see the grace and generosity of a guy named Boaz in their life. But not only do we see the grace and generosity of Boaz, we see the grace and generosity of God. We see that God is sovereign, and he leads Naomi and he leads Ruth to the place where Boaz takes care of her in this field that she is gleaning in. So God leads her to that place, and then we see God give grace to her in that regard, and God gives generously to everybody in this situation. And so we learned last week that we should be gracious and generous, but that more importantly than us being gracious and generous, God is gracious and generous to us. And this week we are, like I said, in Ruth chapter 3, and we're going to go through the whole chapter. And my first point is this. Write this down. Need. N-E-E-D. Need. First point. We're going to walk through chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. It says this. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet. Lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. All right. So already right here in these first 6 verses, and just like we've looked in the last 2 chapters, there's a lot of very Jewish traditional things going on, right? Talking about the end of barley harvest, talking about the threshing floor, talking about going and lying at his feet, and all of these things. And so to kind of break down where they were, so obviously when Ruth comes to Boaz in the field in chapter 2, what does she do? She gleans in his field. Well, it is leaning to the end of the time of barley harvest, and now they're gathering it all up. They're at the threshing floor. This is where they would separate the barley and all of their grains and things like that from the chaff, and they would kind of separate everything from the weeds and all of that, and they would work hard, and then they would have a feast at the end of the day. So that's kind of where we're at. We're at the end of barley harvest, and they're about to throw the party. And it is crunch time now for Ruth and Boaz, because it's the end of the harvest. That means there's nothing left for them to glean. And the next time they're going to get to glean is the end of the next harvest of what the scholarship says would have been grapes and olives. So we see at this festival, Ruth and Naomi, they come to their wits' end. They have no other way for them to be provided for. And we see God has led them, right? Naomi and Ruth, God has led Ruth to this Redeemer, the person that is a relative of the family of Elimelech and is able to marry her, has the rights to marry her. And in God's sovereignty, he leads her to Boaz. And Naomi says, "Look, we're out of options. We don't have any way to provide for ourselves. God has essentially led you to this man who can marry you, who can redeem us, who can fix our family and provide for us forever, not just for a moment, but forever. If you marry him, he will literally provide for you for the rest of your life. So what? She says, dress as a bride would and go to him and lay at his feet. So that's again to talk about the cultural side of laying at his feet before I kind of get into what that means for us. That is not like a weird thing apparently culturally. A servant could have gone and laid at their master's feet. And it's a sign of servitude. It's saying, hey, I'm your servant. I mean you no harm. I'm in need of you. So she does in verse 6 everything that her mother-in-law says, and she goes and lays at her feet. So what does this mean for us? What does this mean for us with all these weird laws and festivals and farming and all of that? Well, I think it first means that we need something in our lives. We need something. Because in our lives, in the everyday, day-to-day, our lives are leading us to death and barrenness. Just as Ruth. Her life is leading her to death. Every day that she lives, she gets older and she is leading to death. And I heard it once said like this: there's only 3 things promised in life. Life, being born, death, and taxes, right? Being born, dying, and having to pay taxes in between. Those are the only 3 guarantees in life. And so Ruth, every day that she lives, she's getting older and closer to death. And her not having a husband, she's more and more growing closer to being barren and having nothing left to speak for herself. Just as Ruth is running out of supplies, we are running out of supplies. We need someone to provide for us because the world is full of empty promises. The world is full of empty promises. We can go and chase drugs. We can go and chase alcohol. We can go and chase sex and say past all that. No, not even the bad stuff. We can go and chase our careers. We can go and chase something else in life, money or anything like that. But at the end of the day, the world is full of empty promises. You so often hear all of these rich people who have gotten all of this money and all of these things, and at the end they're like, it just doesn't make me happy. Why? Because money is full of empty promises. Drugs, alcohol, sex, careers, all of those things are full of empty promises. Yeah, you might get one thing, but then the next thing comes out. You might get the next iPhone, but the iPhone in a year is going to be out of date and you'll get the next one or whatever. And in regards to anything, it's all running out. Everything is running, just as Ruth, her season is coming to an end, so does everything that we deal with have an end to a season. We are in desperate need. That's what it has to do with us, is that we are in desperate need. So now we see that we are in need, and that we are in need of someone to provide for us. We are in need for someone to redeem us, just as Boaz can redeem Ruth. We see Boaz play the Christ figure here, right? In John 5:39, Jesus says, all the Old Testament points back to me. All the scriptures point back to me. We see Boaz play this Christ figure in the redeeming of Ruth, in the providing of Ruth. And this is why I love this book so much, is because it points so much to Jesus, because we are in need. Just as Ruth was in need, just as Naomi was in need, and Boaz could redeem, we are in need, and Jesus can redeem us. Boaz could provide for Ruth. Boaz could love Ruth for the rest of her life. Jesus can provide for us, and he can love us for the rest of our lives. And I think, interestingly enough, Ruth goes and lays crossway at his feet, right? So he's laying here, she comes and lays crossway at his feet, right? We need to come to Jesus. We need to come to Christ and lay at his feet crossway and say, hey, look, we are your servants. We are in need of you. Lord, take care of us. And we'll kind of talk more about that here in this next part. But she goes and lays crossway, but she what? Comes dressed in bridely clothing, right? Get dressed, dress as a bride, and go and lay at his feet. What I'm not telling you is that you have to come to Jesus perfectly, because let me tell you this, Ruth was not perfect. She was a widow, she was poor, she was a stranger, she was from the land of Moab. Like, she didn't have it all going on for her, right? What I'm not telling you is that you have to get everything perfect and right before you go to Christ. No, you go to him just as you are, but be ready. When you go, lay at his feet, ready for him to provide for you, ready for him to love you, and ready for him to change your life. Which is point number 2, leading in, is want. W-A-N-T, want. Very simple. First point was needs. Second point is want. Verses 7 through 13 says this: "And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went and lay down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. At midnight the man was startled, and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, 'Who are you?' And she answered, 'I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer.' And he answered, 'May you be blessed by the Lord,'" capital L-O-R-D, remember, circle that. "My daughter," is the next point. "You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, you do not fear. My daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight. And in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives," circle that, "I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." And so the first thing we see is a couple of things. One, Boaz is out and he's working hard. He's rejoicing in his work. This is just a side note. Again, I said it last week, you should be a hard worker. You should be a hard worker and enjoy your work at the end, right? Enjoy that. Be a hard worker. Rejoice in the hard work that you have done. But then we also see again, Boaz gives these spiritual blessings to Ruth at the request of her. She says, "Spread your wings over me, for you're a redeemer." And he says, "May the Lord bless you," right? And he gives us spiritual blessings back again. We should be spiritually blessing people. But what she is essentially saying when she says, "Spread your wings over me," at this request, right? This request of spreading the wings over her. She's saying, essentially, put your cloak over me. Spread your wings over me. Give me your protection. Marry me is essentially what she's saying, right? And just a quick lesson in dating, guys. Guys, you should chase the girl down first. You should be able to love, protect, and provide for her. Don't make her come to you, guys. Like, you should be the one to pursue and actively chase after her. But hey, also in this, if you're not at the point where you're even mentally capable of thinking of loving someone forever, providing for someone forever, protecting someone forever, you probably shouldn't date. You should be in that right mental capacity before you ever even get married, right? Like, you should be at least thinking in those regards. Like, all right, if I'm dating, I'm looking for someone to marry, someone I can love, provide, and protect for the rest of my life. If you're not even in that mind frame, like middle school guys, 6th through 8th grade, maybe 9th, 10th, 11th grade guys, you probably shouldn't be dating, right? And so that's just a quick lesson here. But she says, look, spread your wings over me, protect me, marry me. And Boaz, what does he do? We see he acknowledges her for her kindness. He says, look, I'm even the old man. You could have went after younger men, and he's still, but yet you've chosen me, right? She comes to him, and he acknowledges her kindness. He acknowledges everything about her. And he says, but there's one hang-up, right? He's all in for this. He's all in, but there's one hang-up. There's someone that is closer to redeeming than he is. And so let me kind of break this down. There's a lot of stuff going on here. There was laws in their culture where if a brother would die, the next brother would take that dead brother's wife. Well, we see Mahlon and Chilion are both dead. And now Elimelech is also dead. So Elimelech has property that needs to be redeemed, right? He's got a daughter-in-law who is unmarried with no sons, right? And so if the brother back then, say Mahlon would have still been alive or whatever, he would have taken both to be his wife. And if not, it would be a disgrace. It would be a shameful act. But now that both of the sons are dead, the father is dead, and all that is left is Naomi and Ruth. It is up to the next relative, the next closest in line, for them to take his property. But if they don't take the property, it's their choice. There's no disgrace, right? And so we see that this is a big if. Boaz doesn't have to take her. Because there's consequences to taking Ruth. There's consequences to taking Elimelech's property and all of these things. And we'll see that in chapter 4. There are consequences for the Redeemer to take this land and this wife and all of these things. I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but this is a big if. But Boaz wants her. Boaz wanted to redeem her. He's like, absolutely. Look, if this guy does it, I will. And I'm in. So what does this have to do with us? Man, we as the Ruths of the world, man, we could choose anything else, right? Boaz looks at her and says, you could have a younger man, rich or poor, right? And there's even something in between us right now. You could marry this guy right now, right? And whatever, it'd be fine. But I want you, is what Boaz is saying. He says, yes, I want you. I want to be with you. We see Ruth comes to the right place. Ruth goes to Boaz and she says, hey, I want you. First, we need Christ. We need someone to redeem and protect us. Secondly, there is someone who wants to redeem and protect us, and that is Christ. Jesus stands before us, wanting to redeem us, wanting to protect us, and wanting to provide for us. Jesus wants you. He wants you. If you've never heard that in your life, man, he wants to lavish love upon you. He wants to be with you. He wants to be in personal relationship with you. Jesus wants you. Why? Why does Jesus want you? And we'll talk about that in this next point. Point number 3 is value. Write that down. Value. Point number 3, value. We're going to talk about why Boaz. We're going to look at all these things about Boaz and Jesus and why they value us. Jesus wants us because he finds value in us. Verses 14 through 18 says this. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you were wearing and hold it up. And she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. And then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me. And he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. And she replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. So there's 2 things that I want to point out here. One is that Boaz gives her a lot. 6 measures of barley. I looked that up in the commentaries and the things I was studying. It's a lot. It could have been upwards of 12 gallons of stuff. So way more than that she could easily carry. He lavishes that upon her. He gives her so much. He blesses her. Why? Because he finds value in her. The second thing that he does is this. It says that he will settle the matter today. Why would Boaz settle the matter today? Because he finds value in Ruth. He finds value in Ruth. Girls, when you get to the point where you're getting married one day, does the man find value in you as the person? Not as what you could give, not for all the things that you could do, because Ruth didn't have much. She couldn't really give him anything, but he values you as the person. Boaz valued her. There was no delay in what, there was no thought. He said, I am going to do it and I'm going to settle it today. Now look to Christ and what he did for us. He came, stepped out of holy perfection. He was God, came down to earth in flesh, and he died on the cross for us. Why? So that he could be in personal relationship with us. He valued us so much, right? Boaz didn't have to give to Ruth. Boaz didn't have to redeem Ruth. Jesus didn't have to step out of holy perfection. Jesus didn't have to come and die on a cross. He didn't have to do that for us, right? Because we were sinners. We were dead in our trespasses and sins. We didn't deserve it. Ruth didn't deserve it. She had nothing to give in return. But what? Jesus comes and he does it anyway. Why? Because, like I said, he wants you, and 2, he values you. He wants to be in relationship with you. He counts you a value even though we didn't have anything in us that was valuable. He died for us anyway to redeem us. And now all we have to do is go to him and want him. All we have to do is go to him and want him. He will lavish love and he will lavish blessings upon us. We don't go to him because he will give us blessings, but when we do go to him, he will give us blessings. He will want to put more love on you, right? We talked about it in Ephesians a couple of weeks ago, with a great love in which he loved us. He died for us while we were still sinners. And I wrote this: you need him, he wants you, and he values you. Which leads us into our invitation. So everybody bow their heads and close their eyes right where they're at, and really just think about these things. I'm asking you, bow your heads, close your eyes, hold your hands out in front of you, and ask the Lord to give you something in this moment. I invite you to see Jesus as the Redeemer who wants you even though he doesn't have to. He wants you, he loves you, he will provide for you, and he will protect you. Believer, you say, maybe I already know this, but I'm here to say you need to be reminded of this daily. He is there for you. He wants you. He will provide for you forever, protect you forever, love you forever. Hey, you don't have to go and chase after the world anymore. He is there for you. I'm begging, I'm pleading, please stop chasing after the world, believer. He has now told you to tell everyone the same good news. Live in him, live with him, and live in his call. Maybe you're not sharing the news that maybe you're doing good living in his presence, but you're not sharing the good news, and that is to share this same message with other people, right? In his great commission. And you're living in sin, not sharing the gospel. Hey, start living in this now. We want all people to come to Jesus. And maybe there's some of you who are watching that are not believers. You say, I don't have a personal relationship with Jesus. I'm here to say that you can. You can come to know him today. It talks about Boaz settling the matter today. Jesus will settle that matter today. You can be in personal relationship with him today. It says today is the day of salvation. That's scripture. You can have salvation today. And all you have to do is come and ask. Just as Ruth came to Boaz and asked, all you have to do is come to him and say, hey, look, will you be the Lord of my life? Will you be the one who protects me forever? The one that I can live with and be with forever. All you have to do is come and ask. It says, if you believe in your heart, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, you will be saved. So I'm going to pray for us in this moment. Father God, I love you and I praise you and I thank you. God, I thank you for us being the Ruths and you being the Boaz, God, that we would be in need, and God, that you would want us, and God, that you would value us. God, I pray in this moment, God, for the believer that is watching, God, that they would live their lives in your protection, God, they would live their lives in your love, and they would go and share that good news, that they would stop chasing after the things of the world and start chasing more after you. For the non-believer, I pray the same, God, that they would stop chasing the world, and God, that the matter would be settled today, that they would come and chase after you, God, that they would love you more than the world. Father God, as we move into this next part, I ask that you would lead us and guide us in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, hey guys, if you have any questions or anything like that, we're about to switch into our live Q&A time. You don't have to go anywhere because our live Q&A starts now.